Let's take a look at a matchup that Tamurkhan's Toad Dragon will actually be good in, that, of course, being the Warriors of Chaos. Very melee-focused factions. In a way, it's kind of a soft mirror, given that both of them have the Marauders and kind of Warrior Knight-type units, but obviously Tamurkhan now in the Plague Ogres do give them a pretty potent option for anti-large armor-piercing. Tamurkhan, of course, being anti-infantry up on his Toad Dragon, but basically the way you can think about Tamurkhan's Toad Dragon is any matchup where a Dread Saurian or other similarly gargantuan-sized monster would be good. Also a matchup where Tamurkhan will potentially be able to do well as well. So let's take a look at the rest of the builds here. Yeah, Gojira here playing the Nurglings. He's got Nurglings, several of them scattered around, some Marauders with Great Weapons as well. Chaos Sorcerer up on the Shrine, that's going to be a nice AoE heal for all of these Plague Ogres, and the Marauder Horsemen being able to throw some axes in from the side. Tamurkhan, of course, and yeah, the Sorcerer bringing in just Fleshy Abundance only, so not really messing around with any damage-focused spells. Warriors of Chaos do, of course, benefit from this DLC, as they have with many of the other DLCs in the past, picking up Bile Trolls and Rot Knights. Bile Trolls, in particular, are pretty decent, given their debuff is -6 melee defense. Might not seem like a lot, but melee defense debuffs, in my opinion, generally are better than melee attack debuffs. Typically, I mean, it kind of depends heavily on the matchup, but generally they'll do quite well here. Archaon, of course, with 2 Armor Trolls in the center, and then the 2 Bile Trolls on the flanks. Front line of Forsaken here, and some Knights of Khorne on the sides. Of course, Rider of Rohan being the player. That's right, guys can't escape community replays, even in early access. But we're going to see a Flaming Sword of Ruin immediately in the center, which will, of course, deal some nice damage to any units which have regeneration. And, oh man, look at those Nurglings just getting absolutely nuked on the charge right there. Plague Ogres charging in, so let's get in close and watch the bloody, brutal action. Was that a little breath attack side-shotting in there, I see, from the Toad Dragon, it looks like. It does apply a debuff, so let's see if we can just quickly spot that. Yep. That suffocating does impact reload skill, which isn't going to matter for the Forsaken or other units, but certainly debuffing their melee attack and also debuffing their vigor is quite nice, as they'll tire out even faster. So, breath attack did some pretty solid damage also, not crazy, but the debuff is a nice component of it as well. We see that Flaming Sword of Ruin upgraded, going to last quite some time, and will punish, really, I mean, the healing rate from the Sorcerer, but a lot of these other regenerating units are not in the same vicinity, right? Like Tamurkhan doesn't have regeneration, but over here on the far side, just helping to kind of shore up this engagement. Plague Ogres also. I guess there's not really a lot that had innate regeneration. For some reason I was thinking something else did, but really it's just the Shrine, right? The Chaos Sorcerer Shrine? No, not even he has innate regeneration. I'm thinking of specifically the Cultist on the Shrine. So, yeah, interesting. The damage then... fire damage will really only benefit from, you know, the raw damage increase, Kindle Flame, and being able to lessen the healing rate, which certainly is something, and giving Kindle Flame to these Khorne Knights, which haven't been wildly successful so far. Kind of been chasing around these Marauder Horsemen a little bit, getting axes thrown at them, trying to find a place to charge in. But Nurgle's just grinding it out right now. Bile Trolls fighting it out with the Plague Ogres here in the center. Tamurkhan trying to seize the title of the Ever-Chosen from Archaon, of course. Absolutely spectacular here. Yeah, that Flaming Sword of Ruin will help a little bit with the damage output, but it's going to need to do quite a bit to overcome the healing rate. You can see that Nurgle is definitely taking some damage, but slowly, over time, starting to grind through. Of course, the fact that Archaon brought along his Trolls definitely helps in that. They can sustain for quite some time. And no Flaming Sword of Ruin on the opposite side. So, yeah, look at this Sorcerer getting bursted down pretty well by Archaon himself. With that Flaming Sword of Ruin, Kindle Flame active. So if Archaon could finish off this Sorcerer, that would be quite helpful. Does Archaon actually have Spirit Leech is the question. No. And he actually peels to go after Tamurkhan here, which I think is a mistake. Rider of Rohan definitely should have kept Archaon here on the Chaos Sorcerer. You need to shut down that passive healing, because it is properly charged up all the way by now. Giver of Abundant Glory has been charged up. Well, yeah, just now hitting 100% in fact, but still quite a bit of passive healing rate. He's going to throw Fleshy Abundance on himself. Well, it's upgraded AoE, so it's going to hit all these units here. And that's going to provide even more healing, of course, in high burst. And the War Shrines do have a lot of HP, so all that percentage-based HP is going to just crumble the balance of power and make things much, much tougher for Archaon's Horde here. But Monstrous infantry brawls, definitely a thing between a lot of these Chaos factions. And yeah, Warriors of Chaos getting the benefit of the Bile Trolls is quite nice. Currently, they are bugged. They do not count as marked units. And in their extended roster, I didn't actually play like a Festus campaign, for example, right? But they have some stuff in their extended roster and multiplayer too, so I'm assuming they would get access to those things in campaign, potentially. But yeah, we'll take a look at that after the fact. The Sorcerer just sustaining this fight. Super key, that War Shrine here. You can see a lot of these units not even necessarily getting close to their healing cap, but if I do mouse over Creative Assembly's fancy new healing UI, you can see their regeneration rate from that passive healing on these Plague Ogres. I can even mouse over heal here to show healing cap, right? Show how much more they can replenish up to that 7,699 number. So very interesting. Slowly but surely, Trolls of Archaon getting ground down continuously. Forsaken, not really meant for a knockdown, drag-out fight like this. I can't help but think if Archaon would have brought along just some halberds instead, I think this probably just completely changes. I don't know. I like the pick of the Forsaken, though, being able to just burst through the chaff units. Maybe you take a mix of the two, perhaps, and deploy the Forsaken out of the flanks to try and cut through and get some flanking attacks while the halberds hold the center. But certainly one benefit, too, I didn't really talk too much about, but Khorne units, a lot of Khorne units got a cost reduction, and I'll also show this. It applies, of course, to Warriors of Chaos, marking their Khorne units. So, like, for example, right, if you're taking a halberd, Warrior of Chaos halberd, you can take them regular, unmarked. You can take Mark of Tzeentch for an extra 100 gold, or you can take Mark of Khorne, which is only extra 50 gold, which of course gives them much better offensive power. It would be an interesting trade-off, certainly. In this matchup, I do think maybe you still opt for the higher defense base halberds, or who knows, maybe even some Tzeentch halberds. Not that you see a lot of demons here, but interesting, yeah. Plague Ogres with the heal sustain are able to get some really nice value. Oh, those are Bile Trolls I'm mousing over, but yeah, 2,000 value on those Plague Ogres. Granted, there's a little bit inflated values on both sides from the healing of the Trolls, the Ogres, and everything else. A lot of passive healing on both sides, but all that being said, still got to do the damage, so it's still useful to evaluate that damage value. The one thing I will point out about the Toad Dragon that doesn't really go in its favor is it has this tail slap animation, which does, at least momentarily, expose its rear arc, I believe. I don't know. I mean, if you actually pull up the... I press the space bar here. Some people ask me, by the way, how I do this. You just hold the space bar. You can actually open this menu here. There's a bunch of settings. But anyway, going on a tangent. Yeah, you can see the actual base of the unit, right? As he turns around to do that tail swipe animation, it does seem like he's legitimately exposing the rear arc of the model. Archaon wasn't able to fully capitalize on that. He did a lot of damage to Tamurkhan, though, and I would say probably outdueled him. Yeah, 3,500 value, whereas Tamurkhan's coming in less than 2,000. Doesn't even pay for himself in terms of damage, but tanks a lot of damage, which certainly is value in and of itself to a degree. Especially in a melee grind like this, to be able to soak up some damage so that it doesn't go on to other units, like, say, this Sorcerer, right, who would have been probably a higher priority target for me, but it's definitely interesting. Another Flaming Sword there for Archaon as he makes his final stand. Toad Dragon jumping on in. I do have to say, from a visual standpoint, Toad Dragon's animations are incredible. It's just that one little tail swipe. Mechanically, could create some issues. We'll see. I might ask a dev if I can, just clarify if that actually does expose their rear arc when doing that animation. Maybe we can do some testing on my own also. But anyway, Archaon, flaming sword in his hand. Slayer of Kings can only do so much here as the king is slain, or at least routs, gives up his crown, and you got a new Ever-Choosed, I guess. Is that how this works? I don't actually know. But he does okay. I mean, technically Archaon does better, like twice better, and is cheaper. And that's really the biggest issue with Tamurkhan's Toad Dragon. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome, but from a cost perspective, it's just broadly not worth it, generally. I mean, yeah, it's tough because there's big, expensive caster lords for Nurgle that are quite good in certain circumstances, and certainly in matchups where Tamurkhan would be good, I would argue Kugath would probably just be better. Especially given you don't have to take your caster and your lord separately, which leads to an even more expensive character core for not more of an upside, arguably less of an upside, especially given that Kugath is a Mortis engine, right? Has that AoE constant damage, but the Plague Ogres definitely benefit here from the Sorcerer on the Shrine. Shrine's just generally pretty decent, and the grind, it definitely is enough to prevail over Rider Rohan's build. Get not perfectly optimized for a grind. Warriors of Chaos can definitely go in that direction very well also, but interesting to see the performance of the Trolls. Vile Trolls didn't quite pay for themselves, but the Armor Trolls definitely helped out here as well. Forsaken also come in and get some very good value. Maybe they were a good choice over Halberds, although I still maintain maybe 2 and 2 would have been better, hard to say. The Knights of Khorne were definitely a big letdown, unfortunately. Just didn't really get the value that they needed to, which is a little bit surprising, but it was somewhat of a thinner build. I mean, neither of these builds, I should say, are quite wide, but yeah, let's take a look here just quickly and talk about Warriors of Chaos and Nurgle. So if I go to Warriors here, yeah, you can see in their extended roster, they've got, obviously, stuff. They get the Pestigors, they get Toad Dragons as well. But in the regular roster, currently do not have marks, which is, of course, not intended. They should. But Rot Knights and Bile Trolls. So, Bile Trolls, 1050. They're decently cost-effective, even in the last battle, given their melee defense debuffs help, you know, the Forsaken and other units pay for themselves. So, I would like... yeah, I had a build... or game, I should say, against Tactical Lich, which unfortunately desynced. I don't know, I may make a short about it. But the Bile Trolls, I had a similar build with Bile Trolls and Armor Trolls versus his build with like Bile Trolls and Epidemius. And yeah, Flaming Sword plus the Bile Trolls beats the other Trolls, who would have thought. But just in general, I think mixing them with the Armored Chaos Trolls, especially because since the Armored Chaos Trolls are just a little bit cheaper, they don't hit quite as hard, but 45 melee defense even for the Bile Trolls is very good on paper, and then their attack is kind of lowish, but they get basically a +6 passively, right, from that Corrosive Bile, and then also help support other nearby units. So definitely mixing the Trolls now for Warriors of Chaos is quite decent, I would say. Even hesitantly in some matchups could be good. And then the Rot Knights are a little bit expensive for what you get out of them. I don't know, they have a lot of competition too, obviously, on Warriors of Chaos roster for like an elite cavalry slot. Just generally, it's sort of the, I hesitate to say mid-tier because they're also quite expensive, but the regular Swordboard Chaos Knights are just so cost-effective, it's hard to really go against them in a heavy cavalry department, generally. But, of course, Rot Knights being a slightly different role, I don't know, would I take Rot Knights over Skull Crushers? Skull Crushers have better armor and leadership, which is pretty critical, although they are significantly slower. They also hit a little bit harder. The animation's probably not quite as good. There's some trade-offs here, but especially considering they're 100 points cheaper, I think the Skull Crushers are probably a better unit overall. Hard to say. You guys will have to let me know down in the comments below what you think. Of course, not having hands on the build yet, I'd love to know what you think later on down the line, and maybe I'll do a hard comparison video between these two at some point in the future. But for now, that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.